Welcome again to another edition of Christian Answers, a broadcast that is aimed at explaining the contemporary issues of the day, no matter what they are. We have been exploring and explaining all kinds of issues today because we seem to have these in the news every day, challenging traditional moral values, Christian moral values, biblical moral values. We seem to have these every single day in the news. They used to occur like maybe once or twice every week, and I remember scanning the newspapers, before the internet even, scanning the newspapers, seeing if there were any moral or spiritual issues that were relevant to Christians, and I would then comment on those one or two issues every week that would seem to pop up. Sometimes there would go a whole week or two without any kind of issue that would pop up that would be troubling to us as Christians. Well, today, in the day and age we live in, every day there are 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 or more issues that are cropping up in the news every single day that are attacking and contradicting the Christian faith. And so I have to spend a lot of different times talking about all of the different issues that are coming up and that we have to be aware of. Now, one of the issues that we have been dealing with a lot, and I wish I didn't have to deal with it with a lot, but we do have to deal with it because it's in the news all the time, is the Supreme Court decision that legalized so-called, quote, gay marriages. Now, we're seeing all kinds of problems developing in society because of that decision. Now, immediately, right after that decision that legalized so-called same-sex marriage, we saw a couple go into the Secretary of State's office and ask for a marriage license. Now, what kind of couple was this? Was this a gay couple? No. Was this a heterosexual, normal, natural couple wanting to get married? No. What kind of couple was this? This was a polyamorous couple, a polygamous couple. They wanted the right to marry based on the Supreme Court decision recently passed and recently decided. They wanted the same protection to marry. A polygamous couple wanted the same protection, and they saw in the law the opening the Supreme Court now gave them to ask for that right. And so this couple went into the Secretary of State's office, the marriage license office in their state, Montana, and they said, "We would like to get married." Now, the man is already married, and he wanted to get another marriage license for his wife so that they can both get married, and now he can have more than one wife, and he can have many wives. And this is going back to the old days of polygamy, and their argument is hard to refute. Once you grant the Supreme Court decision legalizing so-called gay marriage, once you grant that, it's very hard to say no to this couple. So let's look at a video clip of this couple trying to go and get a marriage license. And we're going to talk about it because you're going to see this happen more and more, and you're going to see this legitimized in society. I will make that prediction that based on the Supreme Court's logic in the so-called gay marriage ruling, they cannot deny a polygamous couple the same right to marry in their polygamous relationship. So let's watch this video clip, and then I will stop it and make commentary at certain points. Let's roll the clip.
Nathan Collier and his partner Christine went to the Yellowstone County Courthouse looking to be wed under the Marriage Equality Act. The Colliers practice polygamy, but it's currently illegal under Montana state law.
Now notice they went in to the office to get a license for their polygamous marriage based on the Marriage Equality Act. So they're looking at the Supreme Court, and they're reading what the Supreme Court judges ruled in the Obergethal, this so-called gay marriage decision, And they're looking at the logic of the Supreme Court justices in their ruling, in their 5-4 majority ruling, and they're looking at that and saying, hey, that's an open door for our polygamous relationship, because there's nothing in that document that rules out what we're doing as illegal. And the sad case of this situation is they're right. They are actually right. If you're going to grant the so-called gay marriage, you also have to grant polygamous marriages, because there is nothing essentially different from what the gay marriage people are doing as to what the polygamous marriage couples are doing. They are redefining marriage as something different from a man and a woman. In the beginning, God created male and female. In the beginning, the book of Genesis, we see Adam and Eve, two people in a marriage, a man and a woman. That was God's original intent. And if you're going to get out of that original intent of God, if you're going to depart from it, if you're going to redefine marriage in the way the Supreme Court has redefined marriage, then you cannot arbitrarily exclude a polygamous marriage. You cannot make a definition opening up marriage to new options and then say, oh, but we will not allow that option. There is an arbitrariness if that is the case. And what we'll see going into the future is couples like this polygamous couple, they're going to go into there and they're going to want a marriage license, and they're going to take it to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court is eventually going to grant them that right, because they've already laid the groundwork for polygamy. So we're going to watch a little bit more of this clip and go on in our commentary.
We just want to add legal legitimacy to an already happy, functional, strong, loving family.
As the two filled out their marriage application, they were met with questions.
There's a spot on there where you put the dissolution date of your previous marriage, and we put NA.
Okay. You're married to someone else?
I'm married to my first wife, Victoria.
Okay.
The couple was met with surprise.
So are you legally married to
I'm legally
one
married to
person?
Victoria.
So you didn't get divorced from her yet?
No, we're still we're a plural family. I'm a polygamist. I have two wives.
Hold on just a sec.
Now, the strange thing about this situation is, did people really think there wouldn't be confusion? Did the Supreme Court justices, the 5 members who ruled to redefine marriage, did they really think that there would be no confusion? Did they really think that people would just simply, oh, well, now we're going to redefine marriage, and we're going to redefine it as not just man and a woman, but it could be 2 men, it could be 2 women. We're just going to redefine marriage like that, do that fundamental shifting of the pillars of society, of marriage relationship. We're going to redefine marriage. And did the justices really think that there would be no confusion as the result of what they decided? I mean, how naive can that be? Certainly there will be confusion, and we see this confusion happening right now. It's not in the future it's going to happen. It's not 10 years from now, 20 years from now, the next generation. We're seeing it the next day. This couple, literally days after the Supreme Court ruled to redefine marriage in all 50 states, they headed into the Secretary of State's office. They headed into where you get your marriage license, and they wanted to get a marriage license for a plural family. They wanted to get a marriage license for a polygamous marriage. And the people who work there are confused. And we don't have any doubts in our minds that we would be confused, and everyone would be confused. Did the justices on the court that ruled to redefine marriage think that people would somehow intuitively grasp how to process this open-ended decision that they made? The Supreme Court justices basically opened up the definition of marriage to basically any configuration. Whether they knew it or not, whether they intended or not, they basically opened up marriage to any type of configuration conceivable. And they laid the groundwork for the principles that you cannot discriminate against any person who has any idea of any kind of marriage arrangement. You cannot arbitrarily say, oh, well, we can't do that. And so we see these clerks at the marriage office in Montana scrambling to try to figure out, what do we do now? Because here we just got this 5-4 decision by the Supreme Court that basically redefines marriage. A couple's coming in under the new redefinition of marriage, and they want a polygamous marriage license. And now what do you do? Now what do you do? And so they're scrambling to try to figure out. They're confused. They're scratching their heads. But, you know, the Supreme Court justices should have thought about this. They should have actually addressed this problem that would pop up, because they've opened a whole new can of worms. And we were saying this from the very beginning as Christian ministers, Christian pastors, Christian theologians. We've been saying that if you redefine marriage, if you change the basic configuration as outlined by the Bible, outlined by Christianity and Judaism for thousands and thousands of years, as outlined in basically every civilization on the face of the earth, all recorded history, if you change that basic configuration, you are going to get a slippery slope of confusion and chaos. We were saying that all the time. And here is a perfect example of the chaos and confusion that this redefinition creates. And so, what do we expect? What do you expect when you tamper with something so important as the definition of marriage? You're going to get chaos and confusion, and we see that happening today. Let's watch some more of this clip.
We're not even asking for acceptance. We're just asking for tolerance. Let us live our lives together without fear.
The question at hand, could the Marriage Equality Act extend to polygamists? Now, that part isn't quite clear.
So the confusion continues, the chaos continues. The news report here is bringing up the Supreme Court's decision, obviously, and they're asking the question, does the new redefinition of marriage include polygamy? Would it include polyamorous relationships? Polygamy is usually thought of as a man and then having 4, 5, 6 wives or more. That's the way it has been traditionally in ancient societies, and also in Mormonism. They've had polygamy happening 150 years ago or so in the West, until the United States of America outlawed it as a basis for Utah becoming a state. So the United States of America, at the time, the Mormons and the Utah people were asking for admission in the State of the Union. They said, yes, you can become a state, but you must outlaw this aberrant, disordered, polygamous marriage that you practice. You must outlaw that. We will not tolerate that. That's not marriage. And so Utah decided that they would change and outlaw polygamous marriage. And so the mainstream Mormonism has outlawed polygamy, and they joined the State of the Union, and they've been a part of mainstream America. Now, after this Supreme Court decision, all of that will have to be rethought out. All of that conditioning that the United States had when it gave Utah the ultimatum, you either outlaw polygamy or you can't become a state, all of that has to be rethought, because now, in light of the new Supreme Court decision, which basically redefines marriage in all 50 states and basically says you cannot discriminate against different kinds of marriages, such as 2 men wanting to get married and 2 women wanting to get married. You can't discriminate on the basis of tradition or morality or social convention. You have to allow for marriage equality. That was the big slogan, marriage equality. Well, here we have a couple, a polygamous couple coming in, and they want marriage equality. And the clerks here said, you can't marry someone while you're already married. That's a judgment. That is a traditional 2-person marriage judgment she's making based on past traditional understanding of marriage. Now we're in a new world. Now we're in a new era. The Supreme Court has just ruled that you can't discriminate against different configurations of marriage based on morality or religious tradition or social convention. Now we're in a new world, and we're going to see more and more of these couples coming forward demanding that they have, quote, marriage equality, and they are eventually, according to my understanding, they're eventually going to get that marriage equality, and they're going to get it because there is no arbitrary way to discriminate against now any kind of configuration of marriage. Once you've departed from the male-female biblical model, Christian model, universal natural law model of marriage, you cannot then arbitrarily say, no, you can't go here, or no, you can't go there. You have to open it up to basically anything, and that's what we're going to see in the future. Let's roll the clip.
Okay, and we'll have to deny that because let me go grab the other supervisor real quick so I can get confirmation. But as far as I'm aware, you can't be married to two people at the same time.
The Colliers were initially denied the license. The clerk later returned, saying they would have to check with the Attorney General's office. When asked for comment, MTN News was referred to two sections of Montana law stating polygamy is illegal.
For us to come together and create a family, what is wrong with that? I don't understand why it's looked and frowned upon as being obscene.
She is bringing the same argument as the so-called gay couples brought to the Supreme Court. The so-called gay marriage ruling by the Supreme Court did away with discrimination against looking at two people of the same sex marrying. The same argument that this woman is giving for her polygamous relationship, the gay couples gave. They wanted the same rights and freedoms and the ability to form a relationship and have an official stamp of approval by the state. They wanted that same status as traditional, normal, natural law marriage. They wanted that same thing, and the Supreme Court gave it to them. So how can the Supreme Court now deny this polygamous couple the same rights and privileges as some same-sex couple, so-called same-sex couple? How can that be right now in the eyes of the law, and what this woman is describing as wrong? She said it in the same way as the other arguments were made. She says, we have the same right. We don't want to be looked down upon as wrong is what we're doing. We have a loving family. She's using the same vocabulary as the gay activists used to get through gay marriage, so-called gay marriage, so-called same-sex marriage. She's using the same argument, only she's putting in her polygamy instead of the same-sex relationship. And she's using the same words, same arguments, and I can't see how the Supreme Court's going to say no to her argument eventually. Now, right now, the clerks at the offices, Secretary of State's offices in the states, will have to deny the polygamous couple the license right now because the laws are simply not ready to introduce all of these different variations. But they will get there because there's no reason why they can't get there based on the opening that the Supreme Court gave in the so-called same-sex marriage decision. Marriage equality is what it's called. And so you're going to see it happen. It's going to happen just like we thought, just like we said. The slippery slope is really a slippery slope, and it's going to slip all kinds of different marriages under the rubric of the United States government, and they're going to permit it because they can't say no. There's no logical, rational reason once you've opened the door to shut the door on any particular group.
All right, so if it turns out that you can, then I guess we've all learned something today.
The couple's goal is to have their story heard. The Colliers say if the state of Montana could recognize their marriage as legal, it could be the catalyst for other states to follow suit.
Now, this is interesting. At first, we thought that this couple, this polygamous part of a polygamous family, was coming to just get their own private affairs in order. They wanted to take care of this just for themselves. But here we learn from the reporter that they actually are hoping that their groundwork, doing their due diligence here in their state, will open the door for other polygamous couples. So everybody today is an activist. Everybody is not just doing something for their own family, for their own relationship. Now everybody is turned into this symbolic activism. Everybody does things and are doing things not just for themselves, but for the wider picture. They want to be the groundbreaking couple. They want to be the ones that sway the law for everyone. And so they're not just seeking a polygamous relationship and a legitimacy in a polygamous marriage. They're seeking a national movement that will allow for polygamy in all 50 states. And the sad thing about it, they're going to get that. They're going to get that eventually. There's no reason in the world why the Supreme Court would not grant them their request as they granted the same-sex couples their request.
All we want is legal legitimacy. We're not asking anybody for anything else.
In Billings, Simone D'Alba, MTN News.
Well, that's a dramatic illustration of where our country is going. It's a dramatic illustration of the slippery slope argument coming into reality. And it basically means that once you change the foundational understanding of marriage between a man and a woman, then you're opening up all of the different possibilities. It's like a Pandora's box. Once you open that box up, you can't put back what was in there being held out of public. The traditional understanding of marriage, the basic understanding of marriage between a man and a woman, was the foundation for our Western civilization. It was the basic understanding that people followed all throughout the natural world as far as history is concerned. And so when you tamper with that foundation or pillar understanding of marriage, then you are going to open a Pandora's box. You are going to open up all kinds of possibilities, and you're not going to like what the results of opening that box, opening that door will be. And that was the slippery slope argument that we made. Now, the gay activists would always come back and they would say, oh, that's just nonsense. Nobody's arguing for polygamy. Nobody's arguing for polyamory. Nobody's arguing for bestiality. But it's not that nobody is arguing for them. There actually were people arguing for polygamy and polyamory. But it's not that that was the problem. The problem was the logic of opening up other options to marriage. Before this recent Supreme Court decisioning called marriage equality, opening up marriage officially, legally in the United States to same-sex, so-called same-sex marriage couples, male and female and female. Before that, there was a logic to the marriage definition. It was a man and a woman. There were two people involved because you have a man and you have a woman making two people. That's where two comes in. Now you have the so-called gay marriage, and it's supposedly between two people, a man or a woman and a woman. And so supposedly that is holding to the two aspect of the definition of marriage. But why hold to the two-person aspect to marriage? Once you're going to change the foundational pillar of society, a marriage definition, what keeps you from changing all kinds of definitions for marriage? Why stop at 2? Why not 4? Why not 5? Why not 10? Why not 50? I mean, there is no logical reason other than just a man and a woman equals 2 that you would have a binary male-female two-person marriage. What would be the logic of holding it to any number of persons in the marriage other than the male and the female differentiation? There wouldn't be. And so you're going to have the slippery slope opening it up to polygamy. We saw that, we said that, and now it's actually going to be taking place. The same problem you would encounter in many different other configurations. Why couldn't there be transgenerational marriages? Why couldn't you have a grandmother marry the granddaughter? Why couldn't you have a grandfather marry the grandson? Transgenerational gay marriage. Why couldn't you have those odd and aberrant and deviant marriage definitions? Once you've changed the basic definition of marriage, then anything is possible. Now, we've been saying that. The gay activists have been poo-pooing that. They've been saying, oh, that's ridiculous. Nobody's wanting that. No, nobody necessarily is wanting that right now in our society, but who's to say that somebody won't come along at some point and say they want that? How would you outlaw, for example, incestuous marriages? How would you outlaw, for example, two brothers of the same family getting married in a gay marriage? How would you outlaw that? How would you outlaw two lesbian sisters getting married? Or how would you outlaw a brother and a sister getting married? Or a stepson and a stepmother getting married? How would you outlaw any conceivable, deviant, odd, bizarre marriage configuration based on the new definition of marriage that the Supreme Court handed down? You can't. You would be discriminating against someone's definition of love. You know, the slogan, you should be able to marry the one you love. Well, you think about the implications of that. People have fallen in love with a lot of different things that are very strange. How can you outlaw some aberrant, deviant love relationship? You can't. And so we called it, but the gay activists don't want to admit it. So we need to pray about this. We need to ask God to turn this nation around before it's too late, because we saw it coming and now it's here, people. It's a dramatic illustration of what happens when you tamper with God's will and you tamper with His definitions. We have it as clear as day that in the beginning God created male and female. Male, one, female, two. So you have two people. That's why there are two people in a marriage. That's why there were always laws against bigamy, which is more than two people in a marriage. That's why you have laws against plurality of marriage. Polyamory is the biblical understanding of a marriage. It also corresponds to a natural law understanding of marriage. Two people constitutes a marriage. Now, there have been polygamy relationships in the past in ancient world, and even in, like I said, the Mormon church in the more modern times. But all of these were frowned upon, they were looked down upon, and usually they were forced to go underground, and they were not officially recognized. Now that the Supreme Court has opened up this alternative definition of marriage with the so-called same-sex marriage, you're going to see all of these things come into play, and it's going to really hurt our society. Our children are going to grow up in a society of mass confusion, morally and spiritually, and so we need to be on our knees and pray about this. We need to ask God to deliver us from God's judgment. We need to ask God to turn our nation back around to Him. We need to ask God to send a revival, to bring people back to their senses, bring people back to wisdom. And we need to do the praying. We have to pray and we have to speak out against these evils and pray that God will use us in our lifetimes to make a change for the better in our society. Well, I hope that's been informative to you, but we'll see you back here next week on another edition of Christian Answers. God bless.